The Palestinians have been trying unsuccessfully for a long time to have their own state. So the question is, why they have not succeeded? Abba Ibn has proposed an answer. The Arabs have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. In the following, we will highlight some of these missed opportunities. But first, let's look at a list of some Palestinians' claims. Myth or a fact? The Palestinians don't have a state because of Zionism. Zionism ignored the Palestinians. Zionism is an aggressive ideology. Small Jewish communities existed in this area throughout history. Jews in the diaspora always wanted to return to the Holy Land. Every year in Passover, they expressed their desire by saying L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. In the second half of the 19th century, a grassroots awakening started in Jewish communities around the diasporas. Rabbis and their congregation immigrated to Palestine. They came from Central and Eastern Europe, from the Mediterranean, and from Yemen. Non-observing Jews also immigrated mainly from Europe. All of them called themselves Chovevei Zion. As early as 1850, Jews were buying land in Palestine, inside cities and in the countryside. At the same period, Jews in Russia, Syria, and Europe suffered from pogroms and anti-Semitism. A young Jewish journalist and writer, Theodor Herzl, was deeply moved by that and tried to find a comprehensive solution to the Jewish problem. At the turn of the 20th century, when Jews were using different approaches to evade anti-Semitism, some assimilated, others were hiding their Jewishness, some lived openly as Jews and risked the consequences, others emigrated to tolerant countries. Herzl felt that all these approaches are only superficial solutions. They treat the symptoms of anti-Semitism, but not what makes it possible. Since Jews are a minority in every country that they live, they depend on the goodwill of the majority. The majority, if it so desires, can pass rules that deprive the Jews of their rights within the country, or to ignore when their rights are violated. It can also make policy decisions such as setting immigration quotas that ignore urgent needs of Jews that live in other countries. In order to protect the rights and the interests of Jews as individuals and as a nation, Jews need to be like all other nations and have a state of their own. Herzl thought very carefully about the details of establishing a state where none existed and summarized his ideas in a book, The Jewish State. Herzl realized that this is too big of a task for one person to lead, so he assembled the Jewish Congress. Till his death in 1904, Herzl convened 6 Jewish congresses. Jewish communities from around the world sent delegates to discuss and to decide the course of action. Most of the decisions followed Herzl's original proposal, but some were different. They constitute the principle of Zionism. They decided to call the new movement Zionut, Zionism, based on a verse from Isaiah that describes the joy of the Jews as they return to their land. Jews are a nation. They have a historic right to have their own state in the land of Israel. The Jewish state will be built peacefully, according to the prevailing international and local laws. The Jewish state will be a liberal democracy, not a theocracy, with equal rights to all its citizens, Jews and non-Jews alike. The Jewish state will have all the institutions of a modern state, including an army, a flag, and an anthem. Jews will work in all occupations, especially in farming. The prosperity of the Jewish state will benefit all its citizens, its neighbors, and the world. The Zionist movement adopted a flag, which in 1948 became the flag of the State of Israel. This is the world in which Zionism made its first steps. It was organized as empires and as states. You can see the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German, French, British empires, and the Turkish or the Ottoman Empire. Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire. but it has never been a distinct state. Depending on the period, the regions were part of Lebanon, Syria, or of the Ottoman throne. So, the Ottoman Empire was the address for Herzl's diplomatic efforts. He had to negotiate with the head of the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Sultan. A ruler of an empire could then do things that are now done by governments. For example, relinquish land to another state. For example, the Tsar sold part of Russia to the US. Allow mass immigration and allocate area for the immigrants. For example, the 620,000 Circassians from the Caucasus to Turkey, allowed by the Sultan in 1864. According to the same legal principle and norms, Herzl had to convince the Sultan to first allow immigration of Jews to Palestine, and second, to establish their estate as part of the Ottoman Empire. Herzl lobbied the Sultan Abdul Hamid II. The only thing that Herzl received from the Sultan was a medal. The Sultan did not allow immigration of Jews to Palestine unless it was already including in existing quotas for the countries where the Jews resided. Herzl also lobbied the Kaiser, the Pope, and the British government. The British government offered him to establish a Jewish state in Uganda. Herzl saw it as an official recognition of the Jews as a nation and wanted to accept it. It was rejected by the Jewish Congress. In 1917, after years of effort, political Zionism scored a success in Britain. Chaim Weizmann was the main force behind Balfour's declaration. His Majesty's government viewed with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Balfour's declaration was made in 1917. In 1922, it became the core of a League of Nations official international recognition of the right of the Jews to have a homeland in Palestine as part of the British Empire under the British Mandate, a major political achievement to the Zionist movement. Two new states which did not exist before are formed now in this area. Palestine, where Jews will have their homeland, and Transjordan entirely for the Arabs. According to the principle of Zionism, all this was achieved peacefully and according to the prevailing international law. The Zionist movement continued to buy land in Palestine for settling Jews in what is now recognized internationally as a Jewish homeland. Most of the money raised was used to buy land and to establish Jewish settlements. Buying land was a centralized effort headed by Yoshua Hankin. Individuals and groups who wanted to settle did not have to negotiate on their own with the Arab landowners. Because of the increased demand for land in the previously sleepy land market, prices of land skyrocketed. The Zionist movement ended up buying cheaper, low-quality lands, as you can see in the pictures, for which there were no other buyers: dunes, swamps, and bare rocky mountains. They bought, of course, some good quality agricultural land if they could afford it. Jewish pioneers, both women and men, looked at work as a sacred mission. They worked in farming, paving roads, draining swamps, and other similar occupations. By the end of 1945, Jews have bought more than 250,000 acres, as this map shows. Most of the land was uninhabited when it was bought, and it took a lot of hard labor and investments to improve it. In 1947 partition plan for Palestine, the planned Jewish state contained all these bought and improved lands. The planned Arab state consisted of lands in which there were no Jewish presence. The thin black line is the planned boundary line.